You okay, Ben? I'd like to call to order the Board of Education meeting of August 22nd, 2023. As you are able, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Brad Gerby.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I knew you could roll with that, Brad. Before we start the public comment, I would like to welcome, this is the first time I'll acknowledge them, Matteo Adepolo and Caroline Clark, who are our two new student representatives. Although it's their first night, they're actually fully invested already. They spent a weekend with the NSBMA, we won't work out that acronym now, meeting with school board representatives from all over the country and doing all sorts of cool activities, including, what did you say, also making a proposal? And well done. Well, you'll see we do it exactly the same way that the professionals do it here. And there's never any controversy. Okay. Well, thank you. The public comment section, please. A member of the public may address the board briefly for up to 3 minutes or request to be scheduled on the agenda at a future meeting. Please note that students will be given priority to speak on any topic. The first public participation portion of the meeting will be limited to 1/2 hour, 30 minutes, normally, and limited to agenda items. A second public participation portion will be offered at the end of the agenda to allow for any other comment. Individuals addressing the board should take into consideration the rules of common courtesy. The public participation portion of the meeting cannot be used to make personal attacks against a board member, district, employee, or student. We have no students and we have so there are no comments tonight. Next time I'm going to look up before I read that long thing. Thank you. I'm not well trained yet. Thank you. And I have, tonight, I have no response to public comment. Revisions of the agenda. Please, items can be added or deleted from the meeting agenda, and or the order can be changed at the request of an individual board member or the superintendent. The agenda needs to be approved before proceeding further. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as printed. Brad Gerby moves. Is it? Okay.
And I'll support.
Mr. Austin and Mr. Gerby, thank you very much. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Say opposed, say nay. Thank you. So we have an agenda. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the WEOC, or WEOC, the Washtenaw Education Options Consortium, restated agreement resolution as submitted by Superintendent Lodge.
So moves Stebbin.
Stebbin moves.
Support Miller.
Miller supports. We'll open up for any discussion or questions, and Dr. Lodge can answer them ably, I'm sure.
Well, I'll just give a brief overview, and then if there are any questions, feel free to ask. This is really just looking again at the agreement between all the districts regarding WEOC, which is this educational options that include things like Y-High, the WAVE program, which is the virtual ed program, and now they're going to be offering a middle school WAVE program. And when that occurred, they felt that it was time to revisit all the options and have a conversation with the superintendents about the agreement, especially for the districts who have a lot of kids participating in these programs. We do not have that many in Saline, but for those that do have many, many students, they wanted to reaffirm the agreement and also have some, to be honest, some out clauses with the ability to move in and out of the programs, because as many of you know, the foundation allowance goes with the student to the program. So for some of the districts that are sending hundreds of kids to these programs, they wanted a tighter agreement. So that's what this is about.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or questions? No. Let's put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. We have a resolution. Thank you. And the next part, Trustee Eastep, I'm going to include your name. We had discussed this earlier, and if we want to change it, we will. So I'd like to entertain a motion to appoint Susan Eastep as the voting delegate and myself, Michael McVeigh, as the alternate representing the Saline Board of Education at the 2023 MASB Delegate Assembly being held on Thursday, November 9th, 2023 in Lansing.
Motion Miller.
Support Kirby.
Okay. still willing to do this onerous task?
Yes. Yeah, I'm well, I'll have to be at the delegate assembly anyways, as part of the resolutions and bylaws committee with MASB. And there's not too many this year that we are revising, and so that's going to be a benefit. And actually, controversial issues is one of the things that was edited this year. So, but yeah, I'm excited to attend it. If you all are there early, you get 10 points, or like, I don't even know. Yeah, just to attend. Yeah, last year we didn't think it was going to be so, involved, but it ended up being so, and that's usually fun when that happens. So, yeah, I'm excited to go and represent you all whenever you all get the packet that they'll send out. If you have questions or anything, you could let me know.
Thank you. I'm going to be attending that evening as well, but I won't be a voting member, but I'm looking forward to it, having never seen it before. So, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, we have representatives. You're on, Secretary Miller. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the August 8th, 2023 closed session for the purpose of the school board to review attorney-client privileged communication pursuant to Section 8H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act.
So moved, Stebbin.
Do I have any support? Is that Tim? Thank you. For those new to this process, the board now reads the minutes and makes any scrivener's notes and changes and then gets them back. Oh. I do notice one spelling mistake.
There is one mistake. Oh, no. What'd they do?
It's Troon Law, the second last sentence, as opposed to Thurn.
Oh, thank you.
No problem. And I think I told you, I called them up and they are pronounced Troon, so we can put that to bed.
Thank you for catching it.
Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, we have minutes. I'd like to also entertain a motion to approve the resolution that MISEC, Michigan Schools Energy Cooperative, as agent of the district, enter into a 15-year power purchase agreement for 100% of the annual electricity usage with North Star Clean Energy at a fixed rate not to exceed 0.075 cents per kilowatt hour for the generation and delivery of solar energy, with commercial operation expected to begin in June 2025, as submitted by Assistant Superintendent of Finance Miranda Owsley. Do I have a motion? Is that
Go.
Lauren? Thank you. Second?
Support ESTEP.
Susan Eastep supports. Great. We do have one question that was been floating around that Dr. Lodge will discuss.
Right, so a question that I did receive was, this is a 15-year rate, or 15 years of locking in at this rate. And at 100%, the question is what kind of research is done to determine, is this a good rate? And Miranda spent time talking to other financial officers and feels like this is a good rate. And sure, there's a chance that the rates go down, but there's a better chance that they go up. And so locking in on a good rate now, we believe is fiscally responsible. We also checked with other districts, and the WISD, for example, is allocating 100% as well in this direction. So we believe that there's opportunities with solar energy, and that this is one that we should take advantage of now. We're also going to be looking at solar energy possibilities for, our school roofs and things like that. So we feel like this is a step in the right direction, and we do feel confident in locking in at this rate.
Did that answer the question you were going to ask? Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this? Great, thank you. So put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, 7-0. Finally, under the action items, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the recommendation of A.R. Brower to award contracts to the below-listed contractors in the total amount of $1,865,726 for bid pack number 1 site work for the new operations center as submitted by Director of Operations Rex Clary. And those names are Arbor Land Consultants, $20,190. ILE Excavating Incorporated, $790,000. Nagel Paving Company, $619,790. Spring Valley Landscaping, $299,265. Nagel Paving Company, $41,490. Superior Landscape Companies LLC, $89,991. No, it's not easy and takes practice.
Motion, Gerby.
Thank you, Brad Gerby.
Support Stebbin.
Thank you, Vice President Stebbins. So could you fill us in, Mr. Clary?
Yes, so this was the first bid pack number 1 besides the steel building. It had 6 items. It represented almost 2.25 million of the budget. As you see with that number, it came in well under budget. So shout out to A.R. Brower for getting qualified bids, for one, getting multiple bids in each category, having good documents as far as to bid off of, and then getting a big, like I said, good big bid coverage and hitting their estimate. All bids came in under estimate or at estimate, so we're trending in the right direction. So bid package number 2 is out now, mechanical, engineering, structural, and that'll be due on September 7th. And so that'll come to the board meeting within 2 weeks after that, so.
All that architectural work we had looked at earlier has already been paid for and so forth.
Correct. It's
Great.
already been awarded and the material is on order. The building is on
Thank you.
order.
It's a complicated task, and I appreciate all your efforts in putting that together. Any comments from the rest of the crew? Mr. Rossman?
Like Spring Valley, $299, but their tab, the concrete, it was $575. Was there like an alternate that you didn't accept or something, or?
They bidded the interior concrete, which we haven't put out for bid yet. The plans are out there, but we haven't put out for bid yet, so that number, they'll be bidding again for the interior of the building. So that's only the exterior
So that was
walls,
everything.
canopy, yes.
Okay.
They bid 2 categories. One was not out yet, so.
Any further discussion? No? I'd like to put it to a vote, please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And we are all in favor. Thank you. Carry on. Thank you, sir. We have 2 scheduled reports. Just let me check. Just the two? Just the two. 2 scheduled reports. One is, well, sometimes it's 2 pages. Superintendent's listening session recap, and following that, Rex Clary will make a return to the stage.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to be presenting tonight on superintendent listening session. So this is the 2nd year in which I've done this, and ultimately what that means is I'm getting together with various groups of people to talk about, how they feel we're doing with the district as it relates to equity and supporting their students. And so here's some of the context. More or less, we invited families who identified with racial minority groups, special education, or religious values. I conducted these listening sessions primarily in April and May of this past year. The purpose was to provide a safe space for SAS families to share their stories and experiences, because one thing I learned from doing it the previous years was that people liked the opportunity to come and just talk to me, and then Shannon served as a note taker, and they just reported on what they felt was happening, both positives and things that we need to work on. And they did comment that they felt it was a safe space. We weren't taking attendance and or using their names to report out any information. So it's been really valuable. And then how did we do it? Well, we did send email invitations and a Google form to indicate interest based on affinity grouping. Now, in addition, Power School will allow us to group by race or ethnicity. So we did specifically look in Power School, for example, with students that identified as African American and Black, and we sent an email specifically to those parents. And we're able to do that in Power School using the demographic data in there. For some of the other groups, we sent out a Google form, and they had to indicate interest, upon which then we coordinated a session. So we put this together in major buckets of feedback this year, and Shannon assisted with this. And so it's grouped with positive experiences, things related to communication and connection, persistent challenges, and then how children cope. I put a few notes at the bottom, which are a little bit hard to read, so I'll go ahead and read those for you. You're going to see the term "some" being used when describing summary findings, and I thought that was important because some groups had very few people there, and others had more, but I still feel that we want to say "some" because that's what was being presented, and I don't know for certain that, for example, all African American students feel this way. So I used the term "some" throughout the presentation. The other thing is I wanted to go over sort of how the attendance worked. So this session, and I also put the dates where I did meet with people. So the first session for African American Black, 7 people attended. And these are estimates because, again, it didn't take attendance. So I went back through notes to determine approximately how many people were there. That was on April 18th, then Latinx, Native American, only 1 showed, even though we had more signed up for that night. That was on April 20th. Asian, 5 families or 5 people, April 27th. Special education, we had approximately 15 people attend on May 2nd, and then those that express religious values and wanted to speak about that, around 15 on May 22nd. Also of note, we had very few, only a couple sign up for LGBTQ+. So I invited those people to come to our standing LGBTQ transgender task force that I've been meeting with for around 3 years now. And that's something that will continue. So I actually am getting feedback that way from this particular group. So this first bucket of feedback, positive experiences. So some families reported not have had any incidents of racial harassment in the last year. The racial incidents did occur, have been handled quickly and satisfactorily by the building principals. In the past, we had heard that if something happens, sometimes it's dragging on or it's not addressed. We heard positive feedback about how that was handled this past year. Improved representation in the dean's position is noticed and appreciated. That was specifically true about the middle school. Some students have had great experiences in athletics, band, and the STEAM teams, as well as a safe space for the English language learner or a Spanish room, which is a really nice space for our students at the high school. Would rather be in Saline than in other districts because of the high quality facilities, career and tech ed, and ECSE programming. Some feedback. And the other thing I wanted to point out with all this is mixing a lot of different groups of people. So it sometimes is special education lens, sometimes it's about race or ethnicity. You just have to consider that as we're looking at this feedback. Optimism in the changes made after 2020. And then finally, many teachers have been responsive to student-parent requests for inclusivity. So there's some of the positive experiences. Next, we look at communication and connection. First bullet point talks about parents and caregivers need to be notified when there are racial incidents so that they can have conversations with their children about them. A few parents reported that they sometimes heard something that had happened through their child, not necessarily directly connected with their own child, but that they weren't always aware and wanted to be communicated in that way. This next one lumps a number of different issues related to trust, that there have been some examples of trust being broken, but can be repaired by clearly expressing that SAS will not tolerate racism, sending home detailed syllabi for each class. That was more of a request for parents that want more parent rights, honoring parents, caregivers' rights to decide what is age appropriate for their children. And then there was a request to reinstate parent-teacher conferences at Saline High School so that parents and caregivers can build relationships with teachers. The next bullet point talks about facilitate more socialization between students with special needs and their general education peers to improve relationships and a sense of belonging and acceptance. We do have a number of programs already doing that with STAR and our connecting program at the high school, but some parents felt like we need to do even more in that area. Work to intentionally connect students who are new to SAS with current students. I think that's an important one in that it is hard to come to a new district, and parents recognize that, and so do the students. So we need to work to do more to connect those kids to other students so that they have a peer group that they can associate with. And then another good suggestion was hosting social events. Some of you may know we do this international night with our EL families, and it's a hit. People love it. It's great. And so the idea is, how could we do more of that with all our buildings and invite all our families? So that is a focus that we would look to expand. Did I? Okay, yeah. How children cope. So, so how do kids deal with some of this when they're experiencing some of this, whether it's racism or feeling excluded, whatever it may be? How do children cope? And this was some of our feedback. Some children have become numb, desensitized, believing that this is how Saline is when it comes to racism. You know, when people hear the N-word being said in the halls here or there, is that just normal behavior? We would say no, but if students are being desensitized to this, this is an issue that we need to continue to address with our entire student body. And that some children are now identifying that any different treatment is racism is going on, even if that's not the case. Next bullet talks about children don't want to show or celebrate their cultures because they don't want to stand out, and that may be where they don't want to wear a certain, a style of dress, or they don't want to practice a tradition that their family participates in because they are concerned on how other students would receive that. Some of the students don't know how to manage their anger, but they don't want to fight back or stand out, that they're frustrated when they experience some of this, but they're not really sure what is the right approach. And we talk a lot about how that, we believe, is why the trusted adult piece is so important. Who in the district can kids go talk to when they're experiencing that? And we want to make sure all our students are connected in that way. Some children don't feel heard, and that some children try to find safe spaces, but some still eat alone. That connects back to, how do we make sure that all our kids have a solid peer group, or at least a group that they can be friendly with during the school day for certain. So what are some persistent challenges? That some parents state that there's a nervousness from parents, caregivers about transitioning from the elementary buildings to the middle and high school buildings because of perceived identity harassment. We heard that from a few families, that they have not experienced a lot of that at the elementary levels, but as students start to transition to the middle and high school level, there would be more of that occurring. Some students hear the N-word used. Some immigrant students know that they're different and don't feel as if they belong from as early as kindergarten. Like some report from a parent saying that even early on in the elementary levels, that was hard to be an immigrant coming here and having their students kind of report that they were feeling that way. Some students with invisible disabilities suffer from social ostracization and bullying due to their neurodiversity. One example was that if a student had an issue, dyslexia or something that wasn't showing out front, but that it was this invisible disability, and it was hard for the student to keep up and not be ostracized in different ways. There was some talk about staff lacking training in trauma-informed practices, something that we will continue to work on. And then this was also brought up, that some symbols, like flags in the classroom displayed, are a source of discomfort for some students. That was also brought up by some families. So the big question is, why do we still have these persistent challenges? And the reality is that they persist because our society still has a number of these challenges. And so as a school system, we do reflect society, and we need to keep working on it. We can mitigate. This is also work in the hearts and minds of humans. We all, are flawed, we have biases, and that we need to work on this over time. This work does take time, and I think we need to recognize that and work with the district on our approach. One where we want all students to feel a sense of belonging, one where we want them all to feel part of the school, part of the curriculum. That's important to us. We'll continue to focus on that. And this idea that one lesson, one handout, one guest speaker for all may not impact everyone. There's been some comments that, well, that didn't work for my child, or that, it's a process. And even though we will have a variety of strategies, they don't work all the time for all the students or all the families. And then the notion that if it impacts one child, it is working. It's one child that won't slur their classmate or have further education on how hurtful some of that behavior is. We talk about microaggressions. That would be an example of that. And that progress looks more like a spiral than a direct incline. We learn, we commit, we do, and then we learn more, and we keep going with that spiral. And I would say that's certainly where we are. All right, can you click it? Thank you. So this kind of maps out what we've been working on, and then we'll see a slide on what we're going to do next. So we are currently working on improving communication, reviewing the Hate Speech Act's guidance for effectiveness. How well is this working? Yep, we have this 3-tiered approach, but how well is this working? Continued commitment to bridge to civility. We recognize that we do have some divisiveness in the school district in a number of areas, and we want to continue to work with all families, all students, as it relates to having civil conversations when we disagree with an approach. We're looking to improve community engagement around DEI. Curriculum and testing data. We do recognize there's disproportionality with some of our subgroups as we've looked at that data, and we will continue to focus on that. And then onboarding new teachers with professional development on culturally responsive instruction, that we certainly have new staff coming in all the time. Now, these aren't all new teachers, but the HR department has hired over 50 new hires this past summer. And so we continually have more staff coming in. We need to continue ways to help them learn about culturally responsive instruction. Oh, okay, and then what will we be working on? So this is more of the focus for the future. So as it relates to culturally responsive instruction, part of every building's teaching and learning goal, that this is just good instruction, part of the normal fabric, and we will continue to work on that. The ongoing professional development in athletics. We already spoke about new teacher onboarding within the curriculum review cycle that Kara does with the teaching and learning team, and that spiraling policy and guidelines into expectations for implementation from day one, and that universal design as a means to equity, that how we design lessons helps to support all students. When we look at advisory time, or advisory type, I think a number of you know that we've made a move for the middle school specifically for next year. But if we look back at Hornet time, with a 9th grade specific onboarding for experiences and understandings of DEI, the SMS advisory implementation of Be Good People curriculum, a similar structure, but it really is to get at that social emotional wellness for our students that our public has been saying for the last couple of years. We need to do more, and we want to do more in that area. And then elementary curriculum meetings to support responsible, respectful behaviors and skills with our students. When we look at district level learning, there's a focus on early release days for 23-24 to enhance the tier 1 and 2 strategies to support positive behaviors and effective responsiveness. So the focus is a lot on the behavior element. Because we do believe the behaviors that we have experienced, greater behavior issues, so to speak, over the last couple of years, we do need to tie that social emotional wellness part together with that, and that will be addressed throughout this year. And then data-informed decision-making, we already mentioned disproportionality with some groups. And then cross-district conversations to align positive behavior supports and discipline practices. We spoke a little bit about that. And then finally, SEL collaboration with internal practitioners to examine the system. That'll be important. Next one, yeah. Okay, and then finally, I already spoke a little bit about the bridge to civility, but we want to continue to focus on these 9 norms, that they are important and that they can be a great norming tool, a protocol for the vast majority of our meetings, for the vast majority of our discussions around work that we sometimes disagree about. And I think that's something that we all need to recognize, that as much as we want to say that, well, everybody should support this, that's not always the case. And we want to work to figure out ways to bring our community together and unite around areas that I do believe we can all agree on, and that's how we best support students. So with that said, are there any questions that I can answer now, or I'm actually going to grab my notepad to answer any questions that may need some research.
Thank you. We'll just go ahead. Jennifer Stebbin.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I had just a few comments, not big questions, but in using the Bridge to Civility, engage directly and not relying on social media. A lot of times in social media, SEL is discussed, and I saw that it was on your active What Are We Working On? So I was wondering if you can just define that from your perspective for our students.
On what SEL is?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So we define social emotional learning as primarily ways in which we can work well together, ways in which we can understand each other, ways in which we can deal with conflict. All those things come together to provide for better conversation. And if we can all understand each other more, we feel like there will be less, whether it's name calling, bullying, any of the behavior that sometimes we see because people not having a real good understanding of where everybody's background is or where they're coming from. We believe that that's important to be doing as it relates to social emotional learning.
Okay, thank you very much. Your comment about connecting kids with a trusted adult, always positive. And in the past, you talked a little bit about kind of mapping. You used the incoming 9th graders as an example, but kind of mapping what activities, clubs, sports, extracurriculars have they been involved in the past. Have we gone back to look at that to ensure that a lot of them or folks entering other grades are kind of connected with something to carry them forward? And I ask this because it came up in another slide, and I just wanted to remark how much I really enjoyed seeing that. You said intentionally connect students who are new with current students, and I think that that's really important. So just making sure that someone has even a small network or a trusted adult, I really thought that was a good idea. So I was just curious if the district had gone back and looked at that kind of mapping.
We are, and so a link crew is working on some of that, making sure that those connections are in place. However, we need to do more with the individual student that may not have as many connections. We do find that students that come into the high school with, or already part of an athletic team or a club and organization, they do feel more connected right off the bat at the high school specifically. And so that we need to do more to find those students who don't have those connections. And that's something that I'll certainly be working with the high school administration on.
Awesome, thank you. And then the other idea was just around the elementary students. You mentioned immigrant students specifically, but really any student. I will always use an opportunity to talk about our PTAs and PTOs and what a great job they do, and they could be a resource for those students as well. There's so many, engagement evenings that they could be a part of to really learn about their elementary school community. So thanks for adding that.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Kirby.
I just want to make a quick comment. I just want you to know that how much I appreciate you taking the time to engage in these conversations and to get out there and to be, a face for our schools and someone that, the community can connect with. You talked about connecting quite a bit, so I just want you to know from me to you, I appreciate you doing this work, and thankful for you.
To follow up on that, will you be doing the same sequence again this year?
Yeah, I would, people want to see us keep it going. I know that they care about being listened to, and so I would plan on doing the same setup in the spring again.
Dr. Gold.
Yes, thank you for doing these. I think we talked about this before privately, but could you remind me of how the religious values groups were identified?
We just sent out a spreadsheet that asked if anybody was interested in participating in this group, and then if they said that they were, they left their email and we emailed them.
How did you define it?
We said people that have religious values that
Okay.
wanted to. I don't know that we defined it further. We didn't say a
No, I
lot
mean,
about
Yeah,
how you would define
I was
that.
just curious. I just wondered if there would be any differences if you defined it as religious minorities or underrepresented religions, or if that would be a group that might be worth checking in with.
Okay, I see
In
what you're
lights
saying.
of
Okay.
rising anti-Semitism in the country and
Maybe
some
a
stuff
different way to phrase it, or to have two different groups.
It could be
or-
two different groups. It could
Okay,
be grouped
underreps.
together. Just curious,
Okay, that's a good
um,
suggestion. I can write that down.
but yes, great
Okay.
work.
I just wanted to thank you, but also thank Shannon, because I know the two of you, and I think even Kara, were involved in work organizing and structuring and collecting feedback and reaching out. And so I really want to acknowledge the work that you did, and also thank Shannon. I know that she is doing other things now, but I want to recognize the work that she dedicated so much time to last year. The other thing that just came to mind as we were talking about the connections, and especially at the high school, because that's where my lens mostly is with my own kids there, and just wanted to recognize the work that the teachers and facilitators, not just teachers, I guess it's staff too, that they do to organize the link crews and the web leaders, and the dedication that they have to developing those leaders in students. And one thing that I know was a benefit to my kids when they were younger high school students, and now continues to be a benefit as they are involved in Link Crew, is the connection that the upperclassmen make with the younger students during Hornet time. And I think when we can have those inter-class connections and relationships, and when they're built on starting with fun, but then getting deeper during Hornet time, that creates another safe, maybe not safe adult, but a safe peer that younger kids can go to when they're feeling like, I know for one of my own kids, one of her fears going into high school was that she wasn't going to have a place to sit at lunch. And her Link crew leaders were able to not only assure her that she would have a place to sit, but then check in with her to make sure that
That's
she had
nice.
found a place to sit. So I just really appreciate, I know that there are trainings and things that these facilitators, teachers, and staff go to really craft this experience for students, and it pays big dividends for a lot of our students. So thank you for the work that they're doing to make those connections, and I think that can be a model for perhaps other students that maybe aren't a part of marching band or cross country. You know, when those things are starting before school, it really kind of envelops those kids, and so Link does that for our younger kids, but maybe creating opportunities for those kids who haven't found their niche in the high school or middle school yet. So thank you for that work.
Sure.
Susan, Tim?
I didn't even have to raise my hand, Michael. You're like, no, that's my, earlier, I think. Yes, yes. So I do have a question and a couple of comments. But you had mentioned 2 or so people signed up for the LGBTQ plus session, and you invited them to the Parents of Transgender Children Task Force. Did they attend? Was it kind of the same format that you had for all of the other listening sessions?
No, it wasn't the same format. No, they did not. And therefore, I'm just getting feedback from those. But the one thing we do need to work on is including more people in this standing group that I've been meeting with for quite some time. This is a group of families, primarily with transgender students, and many of them are graduating or leaving the district. And so we need to reinvest in some of our other families that want to participate in that. We also need to figure out ways to, when it comes to this listening session time, that get more families that are interested in meeting with me regarding LGBTQ conversation. And so that is something we need to work on.
So you weren't able to pull from the same format, you just from conversations that have come up over time?
Conversations through our task force.
Okay.
Right. I did not pull that information from the listening session specifically. No.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'll be good to look into how to get those people, because I know one of the sessions had one person, and so if we had 1 or 2, like you said, meeting with them is positive, but making sure that we get that voice as well from families.
Right. Agreed.
And then so I had a question about, because something did not sit well with me, one of the comments, which was some children also now identify any different treatment as racism, even if it's not. Was that kind of a observation, or more like that was actually said?
That was something that Shannon put together for the feedback.
Okay.
So I can't state that was actually said. That was a comment or comments that Shannon interpreted and then provided that as a bucket, a bullet point related to that. Because when those sessions are going on, it is somewhat important for somebody else to be a recorder, because I'm trying to facilitate it and talk to the parents, and it was really difficult for me, because I did do one session without Shannon, and I didn't do a very good job of capturing all the information.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And yeah, obviously, if it's some, you can't, that doesn't apply to all. I was just
Right.
curious about that comment. And then, something really, really powerful that was said about one lesson, one handout, one guest speaker will not impact everyone. If it impacts one child, it is working. That is one child who won't slur their classmate. This kind of came up on the presentation on bullying and harassment, where one of the things that we're doing is the advisory time. and so this is an example of, the SEL, when we're talking about DEI and being inclusive and building this anti-bullying culture. I mean, that speaks to it right there. That, even if it's one child who isn't using a slur.
Right.
So, it linked in last time to the board table here as we consider controversial issues slash instructional materials opt-out, that we also keep that in mind because things like this is being opted out of when we talk about SEL, DEI. And so hopefully people can't opt out of, the bullying education piece when somebody is a perpetrator. I hope that's not going on, but something to think about when we're having the discussion later on. I think it speaks volumes.
I just wanted to thank you for putting universal design for learning at the top there and your professional development goals for the district. I agree wholeheartedly that they are a pathway to equity. Mr. Lawson, anything? All right, thank you. Well then, thank you very much, Superintendent Lodge. I appreciate that. Rex Clary is on deck.
I just wanted to make sure that Caroline and Mateo know we'll never put you on the spot, but if you ever want to comment or ask any questions, student voice is super important. So I'm glad to have students back at the table.
I told them that this evening we would let them slack a little and not put too much pressure on them.
I purposely said it after Steve sat down so they didn't feel like they had to comment.
Mr. Clary.
Good evening again. First, slide number 1, I just wanted to give a shout out to the summer 2023 teamwork. So many people worked this summer to make this a success for next Monday, the 28th. From cleaning to teaching to coaching to hiring to payroll to transportation to training. Just there's so many groups that are here this summer that people don't realize. And 10 years ago we may have used 2 buildings. We were able to shut buildings down. Now we use all of our buildings, pretty much all summer long. So just a shout out to everybody that worked hard this summer to get the schools ready for Monday. One of the slide number 3 here is our middle school transportation. As many of you know, Maple Road will remain closed from Michigan Ave to Woodland Drive, to the railroad tracks until early December. The original estimates was early October, late September. They've run into some complications and that's been extended. We met with administration from the middle school as long as central administration, and we talked about how will people get to the middle school. Will they come down Industrial Drive, or will they go Saline and Arbor Road and come up Tebow? Will they sloop around and take Woodland Drive to the stoplights to help? We don't know, but we took a stab at it. So
You're talking about the plan or the reality?
Yeah, and it changes every day. Next week there'll be flagging. There'll be 1 lane available at Barra Terrace between Woodland and Maple Road. 1 lane, they'll be flagging from 9 to 3 p.m. So be ready for that piece. So the morning drop-off won't change too much. They'll still be coming. A lot of people coming using the front of the building. That was mainly for special ed. We will have general ed now available to move into that space as well. It is 2 lanes, so if people are unloading special ed, and they'll be able to stop, get out of the car. This will take some time, and we want everybody's patience for this. And then you'll be able to use the main loop, of course, in the auditorium. You'll be able to drop off at the west side of the gym at the middle school in the morning only. Where the change really takes place is the afternoon. We will pre-stage our buses in the West Gymnasium parking lot. So those are our middle school homebound buses. They're staged there. They're waiting for the high school students to come from the high school. Our high school students will come in and they will fill in to the north side of the gymnasium where it says transfer buses. We've got some concrete barricades or mafia blocks in place now to protect student movement. As our high school buses come in, they will disperse to their middle school homebound buses as well as stay, and then the middle school buses that are waiting in line patiently will load onto those homebound buses to start their day. We have 50 minutes between when the buses arrive and when we need to get back to the Pleasant Ridge, Heritage, Harvest, and with the Meadows. That doesn't change. So how we get kids in and off the buses safely and efficiently is very important, so we can make those times and make those building times to get the B run, the second round of kids, the kindergarten or young 5 through the 5th grader home as well. And so I don't know what Tebow Drive is gonna look like. We can't stack a lot of cars to turn left onto the Saline Arbor Road. I did meet with the city this week. We talked about altering stoplights at Woodland and Saline Arbor, Maple and Woodland, as well as a temporary light. Didn't get a lot of traction there, but at least I ran that up the flagpole. They are in the works of putting a new stoplight at the front of the middle school. Once this project is done, we're working with the Washtenaw County Road Commission and federal funds to get that, a new stoplight and crosswalk at the front of the middle school. So that's down the road, but they are working on it. And I just, again, patience. We're gonna need some patience from parents and bus drivers as well. And we'll get the week started and see where we're at. Transportation bid day. So our transportation bid day was Tuesday, August 15th. We had 22 routes available, and we had 13 route drivers show up to bid on the 22 routes. So we started the year off 9 short. Since June 10th of 2023, we've lost 4 drivers due to retirement, medical, or resignation. And in the past, we've been able to cover that with their operations staff. All 5 people in my office are drivers, and they do drive. We've got 2 grounds employees that one's driving morning and afternoons, the other one's just driving in the mornings. We've got some long-term substitutes, but we just can't do it. So for next week, we will cancel 2 routes, bus 62 and bus 79, and you'll see that communication start heading out tomorrow. And also during next week, we won't be able to offer any athletic transportation until after 5 o'clock. When our buses return, they return about 4:45, 5 o'clock, and we'll be able to offer that transportation at that time. We are seeking alternatives with Divergent Staffing Solutions. We do have a meeting set up for them on Thursday. They do have drivers available, but that's all we've heard from them so far. So we are working on that to try to fill that as a stopgap, as a bridge to our new, hopefully, contract in the fall, and our ability to recruit more drivers. But we're meeting with them on Thursday. They've still got to pass an orientation. We've got to go through a background check. They've got to go through Saline area schools training. It's one thing to drive a school bus, but we want them to be able to drive a school bus for Saline area schools. And we hope that bridge, so we're just gonna cancel 2 weeks this route. We hopefully we can get through this route and not cancel any more. But if we do have to cancel more routes, that cancellation will happen next Wednesday. And it'll be a rotating schedule. The same 2 routes will not get canceled each week, so. Help wanted, come join our team. Any questions on that?
I did have a quick question. You talked about the stoplight. I've been hearing from a lot of folks about stoplight on North Maple. That's where you were talking about, right, North Maple? Does this also mean that they're going to be, no?
Is it?
What's the stoplight you were talking about?
It'll be at the library, middle school exit, but it's gotta be in conjunction with our new bond work and how we determine how we're gonna enter and exit this campus off of Maple Road. So I kind of put the brakes on it a little bit. I want to design our ability to get students and stack cars on this campus better so we don't stack up on Maple Road to stop other people's traffic.
Right. Okay, I do have questions about sidewalks and so forth. Are they going to be installing a sidewalk as well? Or is this?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Great. That's all part of the plan. Because if there's anything that I've been asked about more than anything this year, for the last year. It's been that whole transportation, the busing and the drop-off. So thank you for the hard work on this.
Yeah, the middle school, I mean, there's 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. We try to make it as safe as possible. This building was built as a high school with kids driving themselves, not parents coming to pick kids up. And so that we didn't have a lot of queuing or stacking ability on this campus. And that's something we're looking at right now, is how we're gonna make that happen.
Could always lower the driving age a few years.
Sounds like a good.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan, doesn't it? All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone else on the board have, Susan, thank you.
Thank you. So the clever name Drivergent Solutions, I love it. Is that something that contract-wise will have to come to the board at some point after those conversations, or?
I don't
HR
believe so, because it
component?
is a staffing. It's not a contract whatsoever. As soon as we're able to backfill those drivers with our own drivers, we can separate. So there is no long-term contract. We do have a contract as what we're going to pay, but we're still fine-tuning that piece.
Okay.
But I don't believe so.
Okay, I'm curious. Thanks.
Ms. Miller, Jennifer Miller.
It's almost like EduStaff, so like a staffing agency. So that's just, as we need them, they'll come to us. But it's a little bit different than putting a teacher or a para or something like that in a classroom with another teacher, because that's normally not how it works in school bus drivers, but that's how it'll be, so.
Secretary Miller, quick question.
Yeah, I had two just quick questions. The first one that I was wondering about, you said that Drivergent has drivers that they can, that might work to suit our needs. What is appealing for a driver going to something like Drivergent instead of coming to a district?
Wage.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
They are, they're hired to drive. They may be in our district. In theory, we're hoping that we have five drivers that show up and stay with us until we can backfill them quickly and move on to the next person that's a Saline Area Schools employee. But they may drive for us for a week, a month, then they have to go to Canton or White Westland, Belleville. Those are districts that are using them right now. It's a Macomb-based company out of Warren. Very professional. It's a different model than most because it does not require a contract.
Okay. And then I wanted to elevate something that you said too, just that bus safety has been high on my mind recently, and so I just really appreciate that you're not just bringing in a temporary driver, but you are incorporating them into safety training and driver training and all of the things and expectations that we have for safety for our students. So I appreciate that you added that piece to your presentation to let us know that these drivers will be familiar with the expectations and safety regulations that we have here, standards that we have here for our students. So thank you for including them in that.
Yeah, and our drivers are professionals. They're not going to put up with anything that's unsafe. Tracy Mulcair and Anita Feldkamp do a great job, and they have very high standards running the day-to-day operations of the transportation department.
I really appreciate those folks, and my own kids had wonderful experiences on the bus, and I trust that kids today are having wonderful experiences on the Saline buses. And so by bringing in these folks even temporarily, it's important to me that we have that same kind of quality. So thank you for doing that.
Tim Austin?
So first I want to thank you for all that you do and oversee, because I feel like your department is understaffed. I mean, obviously we see that with the busing. So you're dropping 2 routes. That's including all of you still driving? Is that correct?
Well, the first week I can't have Mrs. Mulcair or Mrs. Feldkamp in a bus. I have to have them coordinating, overseeing if a student misses a bus or how we react to those situations. I really need them running the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, because
from
I see it
afar.
being very difficult for your whole staff to be out driving buses.
I drove my bus today, yes.
Did you?
Yes,
Okay.
I practiced my bus today, yes.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, you hear a lot about and you see you driving, and I just want to give a shout out to the amount of work that you guys also do on the grounds. I know some people don't think the grounds are well kept, and maybe in some instances somebody's not going to think so, but so I reached out to Rex earlier to find out a little bit more information. So we maintain 140 acres, and we have 3.5 staff members doing that. And of that, one of the grounds employees, like you mentioned, is driving a bus in the morning and in the evening, and then one is only driving in the AM. So of those 3.5, you don't even have really 3.5. And so I think you guys do a tremendous job maintaining 140 acres with basically no staff.
It started off as a slow spring. Well, actually, I think it was a busy spring, and then it died off there for a while, and then now you can't even keep up with it. We're mowing athletic fields 2 to 3 times a week, general grounds once a week, teacher moves, staff moves, stuff like that. Those guys do a great job. And then, we want our people to take vacations, but we want to take vacations from June 10th to August 28th, not anywhere besides that. And so then we work through that as well as being short-staffed, because they need their time to refresh and get rejuvenated for the next year.
Yeah, so I just really want to thank you for overseeing all this. I think it's difficult to run any operation when you're this short on staff, and shout out, they're kind of the unsung heroes of the Saline schools.
They do a great job.
So you talked just now about wages being a determining factor for Divergent versus here. So how much research are we doing to make sure that I know that we negotiate these things, that we are competitive with the Divergents of the world and other school districts? And are we running spreadsheets? Are we running, I guess I'm wondering, how do we know how we compare and stack up so we can compete?
Well, we do have spreadsheets as far as the actual wage, but the benefit package and the pension, if you are a state of Michigan employee versus a privatized employee, and the insurance, each one's a little bit different. We do have that information available as we go into collective bargaining with the ESP, and we've looked at a lot of different things to factor in what we need to be competitive with districts in our area, and we're just not there right now. That the piece of being a driver, are they getting insurance? We don't know that. Are they working 30 hours a week to be eligible for insurance? We don't know that. So there's different factors that go into that. It's more than just the wage, but if the wage is a determined factor, we're looking at ways to be more competitive in that market without having to privatize. That's what we don't want to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Real quick, so that first slide, just wanted to amplify the thanks that you gave to that whole group and what others have said. It's very clear that group cares a lot about kids, but it's also very clear that you're very thoughtful about our families as well in terms of safety, but also the scheduling of those cancellation routes. When you have to make hard choices like that, knowing that you're trying to not put that burden on the same families every time, I think is really thoughtful. So thank you very much. If there's anything anybody can do to amplify the call for safety around Saline Middle School, I mean, I know that everybody would do it. At least 2 times a week last year, I would see kids jump out of cars in the drives, at the stop sign right before you have to make the right to go out towards the library, just places that people should not be letting kids out of their cars. So parents also and guardians also need to do a really good job about safety. It's not just making sure the drivers of the buses and everything, it's all of us too, because we could do a better job.
Definitely. And in this diagram, you'll see that the person, so as football comes out and they get ready and they walk across the crosswalk there, and we're monitoring this, of course, next week. One person, strategically located, there's going to be more than one person, I can assure you. But it has great visibility of both sets of buses, both the middle school buses and the high school transfer buses. We really feel like standing in that intersection. We've worked with the senior center to let them know that they need to end programs by 2:30 and not start till 3:30. So Nancy's been great with that as far as, this is what it's going to look like back here. We just need to work in collaboration with you guys, with the senior center, to make sure we keep kids safe at the end of the day. So we feel good about it. We feel it's going to be really safe. We don't know how it's going to transport related timing. But we will find out on Monday.
Appreciate that. When I first moved here 16 years ago, one of the first administrators I met was Mrs. Chekowitz, who was ushering me into the middle school parking lot. So, yeah, so all those administrators, thank you. I saw that smile. Thank you very much, Mr. Clary.
Thank you.
We have one discussion item tonight, which we are going to call a first reading of the issue that's been discussed once at this table and for many, many weeks with the policy committee. And tonight, Jenny Miller, Secretary Miller, will be facilitating the discussion of policy 2240. Thank you.
It's
Good
funny, when I was leaving work today, I said that I had a Board of Ed meeting, and my principal asked what was on the agenda, and I told her, and she was like, "Weren't you working on that last year?" I said, "Indeed, we were." Yeah, it's been a little while, yeah. So tonight is the first reading, and in the board packet that was online, there was a copy of the draft for first reading. And then also, because I know that the trustees appreciate the red and green, so the red and green copy is there and was sent to all of you to preview ahead. And then lastly, we had some correspondence because at our last discussion of this materials opt-out policy, there was a request for it to be run by legal one last time. So that information, that correspondence, was also sent to trustees to consider. The policy meeting did meet the day after our last regularly scheduled board meeting to discuss this last bit of legal counsel, and decided to bring this current draft forward to the board for discussion tonight for a first reading. And I guess that's the introduction that I'll make for now, because you've had time to read over this. But I do want to extend the microphone to my colleagues on the policy committee. Specifically, I know that Trustee Gold had sent some words for some thoughts around the legal counsel piece that was the latest given to us. So if it's okay, I'll extend the microphone to open the floor to Dr. Gold first.
Okay, yeah, no, it's fine. I guess I should give some context. So I think you're asking me to speak specifically as to our decision at the last policy committee meeting to go ahead and bring this to the board table in the way that it was read, in sort of disagreement, I guess. I don't know, disagreement, but we did not take we took a lot of pieces of legal advice. We did not choose to take the very last piece of legal advice. I think partly because that language had been run by legal on a couple of prior occasions, and it was not flagged. Also because the language that the attorneys used was not particularly strong, I don't think. It was like, well, this might be an issue. So I had some written comments, and I think for clarity, I'll just probably read what I had said at the policy meeting. So I'm sorry if it's a little bit, I'm looking for it now. I'm sorry if it's a little bit repetitive. Give me a second.
I guess I can explain too that when we had sent, this would have been the third time that we had gotten legal counsel. The first time was Rob Dietzel from Troon, and then Jennifer Starlin, and then this last time it was Jennifer Starlin again. And in this final reading, Jennifer Starlin asked us to consider the phrase "should be considered with respect to individual circumstances," and she questioned whether we should include that or not. And in a part of her comment around that, she did say that if that were to be challenged, she felt that it would stand up in court, but if it were to be challenged, it could be costly in court. So that part kind of gave me pause too, because I kind of felt like it wasn't like the typical legal advice that is like, this violates these laws or this precedent. And so it wasn't really clear cut as other legal advice has been.
Yes, with that, I'll just read my comments. I'm loath to disregard the advice of counsel. I feel that leaving the reference to individual circumstances in the policy is warranted. First, I think that the policy is meant to set vision. As it has been stressed to the board, the administrative guidelines will do the heavy lifting that the educators will develop. But we have heard from our members of our community that they would like to have an opt-out policy despite the advice of legal counsel. Our community has asked us to provide a mechanism by which students may be opted out beyond the statutory reasons covered by the law regarding sexual education or under the religion policy. Therefore, the very essence of our intent in creating the policy was to create a mechanism by which people and teachers, educators, parents, families, students could take personal circumstances into consideration, because there's already statutory precedent for other reasons for opting out. So that is part of the language regarding individual circumstances. Our goal is to ensure that we're providing the best education possible, and this, I think, will put the focus of the policy on where it belongs, the individual educational experience of a student versus like any larger societal issues. It's really trying to say we're looking at individual students and what teachers and families decide together is best. I would like the spirit of the policy to make it clear that the district does not support en masse opt-outs based on any one agenda, but the district does support listening to and working with families. So for that reason, I believe the wording is worth keeping. And I don't think that it's clear that every threat of a lawsuit has any actual legal merit. So I don't think it was wise to rewrite the policy based entirely on fear of unfounded legal action.
Thank you. Any follow-up regarding that language, Trustee Eastep?
Sorry, I was just I was listening to the last thing that you said. So I was like trying to, you just put me on the spot. I was like.
We can circle back. I just didn't know regarding that particular language and that decision to leave it in there. If that particular piece, if you wanted to speak to that, or if we can come back to it. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, and it's kind of a, I guess, broader, maybe discussion for comment later. But, I had pointed out during the public meeting that Ms. Starlin went back to and referenced the 3.5-page document that we received from Rob Dietzel. And I think in the past, some of her stuff, like discussions with Steve, have referred to, made reference to that specific item that he had written for us. And so that I think kind of a conversation about, for example, she said, I see a lot of room for error with talking about the individual circumstance, but I feel like she's talking more broadly, our, and I'm reading from this because it was read at the policy meeting. So granting some but not all opt-out requests may draw a viewpoint discrimination claim. So it says, my fear with this policy language is that it doesn't provide direction to administrators on when requests can be granted and when requests can be denied. And so that seems to be a theme that it has kind of come up that, we need to have neutral application. And then it said anything but neutral will expose the district to legal liability. We've talked about the mandatory versus permissive. So even with this component, with the individual circumstances, which, I I don't necessarily think should be taken out based on this, because in other areas, you know, it's still, you know, you fill out a form and the educational team is going to be considering regardless. But we don't have strong language to kind of guide the administrative guidelines. So, you know, honestly, I feel like it's kind of like, you know, if we don't have that outlined, that, you know, it's putting legal liability on our staff members and how they make these decisions, regardless of the words of, you know, an individual circumstance and things like that. So that's just something I've kind of honed in on, that, you know, we don't have to legally require it at all. So it was a conversation of like, well, we can put in whatever then if we don't have to legally require it. But, you know, there's still this legal liability component to it regardless. And so I guess we do have the freedom to put these words in there, but still a risk. I don't know.
So I went back to, and maybe many of you did too, I went back to the original document from Troon that we had received from Rob Dietzel in May. It was May 23rd. And a couple of things that I kind of drew out from that in regards to this conversation, a couple of things that Rob had shared with us. The first is that he did feel that this policy was written narrow in scope, which was positive because it does provide guidance for educators and specifically specific items that can be included in opt-out. It limits the impact to a wider scope of students. In fact, it eliminates that. It specifically says that it can't impact the education of other students. And then the other thing too that I went back to is kind of what Susan was referencing too, but he specifically talks about viewpoint and protected status discrimination. And then he goes on to talk about the permissive versus mandatory language. So one of the things that I think it was Trustee Gold raised is that the first piece of advice from legal was that we not have the ability to opt out, that we don't offer an option for opting out. It's not legally required, and so their first legal viewpoint was to say, don't do it because you could open yourself up to, potential issues, or people might perceive potential issues. However, we've heard from a number of parents, and especially we've heard from teachers who are navigating this without much guidance. And I shouldn't say without much guidance. I know our teaching and learning team and Steve have been really supportive, but there isn't like a universally implemented process or procedure. And so we do feel like, or at least I feel like, I'll speak for myself, I do feel like this does begin to create a process for that partnership with parents and teachers, and it doesn't put teachers in the hot seat. It invites a team of educators along with the parents to partner and make decisions for their students. It also doesn't allow for blanket opt-outs. So I've heard people say, that it could impact our advisory times, and the policy and the accompanying guidelines are very draft guidelines are very clear that that opting out of all of Hornet time is not an option. That would be a a discussion that parents and their educational team could discuss around certain topics, materials, I guess I should say, around specific materials. So for me, I feel like this is offering the support that teachers and parents and public comment and emails have requested. So for me, that language maintains the intent of the policy. However, I do feel if the board feels strongly about removing that language, I don't I would rather have that language removed than to not see this policy in support of the educational learning experience for our team and for our teachers and students. So that's my kind of stance on this. I had a conversation with someone around whether or not we are kind of not taking the advice of the experts. And I feel like we already are making decisions based on the individual needs of our school district, and we are the experts. Well, we are not. Our team around us is the experts, and they've given us feedback on this. And so I do think we are taking advice of experts, even if we don't always take the direct advice of legal. And again, as Lauren pointed out, this was, Rob Dietzel took a look at it, Jennifer Starlin took a look at it, and then at the last time that we sought legal counsel, this came up. So the first 2 rounds, this wasn't language that was flagged. So I do think that it took a little bit, and perhaps we asked an abundance of legal counsel for this policy, but I do think it was an important one. So
I guess I'd just say, and that I would cede, but not having a policy doesn't mean that requests aren't going to happen. People are going to still have requests and have requests possibly under other policies. And then we may have a patchwork of each teacher is struggling, trying to decide on their own how to best maintain a good relationship with the family and how to be accommodating, but not too accommodating. And you may have differences from one classroom to another and one teacher to another. And I'm no lawyer, but I do know a lot of lawyers, and that doesn't seem like it's all that legally awesome either. Having no policy at all isn't, I don't think, it just means that we, the board, have our hands out of it, but I think the teachers are still left in a similar position, and families are still left not knowing what is acceptable. And one family might get one answer from one teacher one year and a different answer from a different teacher another year. And so I think the idea of having a policy is to have some, framework. And again, this policy very specifically references not impacting the education of other students, not taking out large portions of the curriculum, and being sensitive to individual circumstances. As students are treated as individuals, it's very hard for me to imagine how that is going to necessarily be a bad thing, and if there's no policy, or the policy doesn't even say that we're going to treat students as individuals, it doesn't mean that people aren't going to be making judgment calls all the time that could be interpreted as viewpoint discrimination. Whether or not the policy has that one phrase in it or not seems sort of beside the point. It's going to be how the policy is carried out that is going to either work or not work, I think, really.
So, just one second. I wanted to start our discussion around that piece, since that was kind of the newest piece since this has been to the table. But I do want to, after Susan has an opportunity to speak to that piece, I do want to open up our discussion to the policy as at large too. So, so get your questions ready. Trustee Eastep, sorry.
Yeah. So just to be clear, and you did clarify when you were saying you clarified that it was you, because I haven't heard from educators besides talking to people who have talked to educators. So I don't know if that's something I missed, or maybe you all, the two of you, people reached out to you or whatever. I really haven't heard that. And then when I went back through the comments that we had actually last year, there were a lot of public comments that we received when we discussed it in general, the policy, that there was about, a lot of repetitive people who come speak, but there was about 15 or so who were super let's keep this policy, support it. And a lot of the things that came out from those people who spoke were very harmful to the LGBTQ community, and based on, I think we heard maybe some come to the table here as well. So as far as like, and then I know there was about half, so it's like half and half really, I think that I counted out, that are saying that, you know, if we have this policy, it needs to state that, and it's not part of this policy right now, but that, you know, that you can't opt out based on bias against like an identity, and that's something that hasn't been accepted, even though we're offering this draft, right? Anyways, but so whenever I guess I see it differently whenever we talk about the amount of people who have asked for this policy and what that means. Like, it's not just as a whole, like this specific draft either. So just kind of making sure that we think of all perspectives there. I guess I had like, I'll do my statement after you start the conversation, I guess, because, yeah.
Okay, I don't know if there's any clarification around that particular piece, but if we want to open the floor to a broader discussion around the first reading of the proposed policy that you received, we can begin that.
I have a super 50,000-foot question.
Okay.
So it might be a good place to start because it's super basic. I don't sit on the policy committee, for folks who know or don't know that. And so I guess my question, I'm just seeking to understand in this reading and gather information. So my first question is, I went back to some of the emails in May as well and saw some of those drafts. And I guess my first question is, our Neola policy book online, if we look at 2240, it looks very different than this.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to, and May looks much more like this. So can you speak a little bit to the evolution of what we have online and what we have in front of us? Not getting into like specific, but the language overall is very different. So I was just wondering for any comments.
Right, so the current policy is very different, and the intent of the policy is very different. And when we originally, I mean, it goes back to the beginning of my time on the board, but I know it extends even before that. This policy has been brought to the table as one that needed to be reviewed and needed to be discussed more broadly. And so we reached out to Neola. We reached out to, I think, President McVeigh, correct me if I'm wrong, but we reached out to Troon, Neola, and several others to ask if they had done work around this, because it seemed to be a topic of conversations. If you Google controversial issues in schools, and I know I work in another school district, this has been a topic of conversation. And so I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, President McVeigh, but when you were the chair of the committee, I believe that Neola said, "Oh, that's a really good idea. Let us know if you come up with anything." And so
And they were never heard from again.
And they were never heard from again. And so we put our minds together. We collected community feedback and came up with the draft that is in front of you after many, many months. And what I would propose is, if this policy is, after a second reading, is voted on and accepted by this board, that we would rescind our current 2240, and that when we send this to Neola, they would give it a new number.
That helps to clarify, because it's super helpful when we see the red and green on our markup copy. But it was red and green off of the May draft
Yes.
versus this, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yes,
All right,
exactly.
thank you.
Trustee Eastep, I saw your hand too. Do you want to go ahead now, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, I mean, it's not question-based, so.
Right.
If everybody wants to differ.
Okay, we can do questions then, or how do you want to?
Okay, I'll go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you know that since 2021, 5 states have passed bills that allow parents to opt their students out of any lessons or coursework that mention sexual orientation or gender identity. 2 of these states that allow opt-outs have now taken it even further by adding don't say gay or trans laws. Florida and Arkansas are those 2 states. Kind of to whenever you type in controversial issues or opt-out, and it's coming up and being talked about, is because of this very reason, the anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and harmful laws that are being created. So the policy is not required by state law. Legal has cautioned against it. The board is, I assume, choosing to keep the policy in general. My suggestions of revisions not allowing opt-out based on bigotry against protected classes will not be considered. The advice that's been given to us has been repeatedly focused on LGBTQ versus religion. In fact, the last examples from Starlin use the terms homosexual couple, and then the next example was traditional family. So it's very much been centered on that, and I can't ignore that. LGBTQ families have requested for the removal of this policy since late 2018, after the public notification and opt-out for the reading of I Am Jazz. The practice of families opting their children, LGBTQ or not, out of inclusive curriculum, which we've heard from our community who want this policy, out of LGBTQ, race, ethnicity, DEI, SEL, specific individuals who teach those things and support that. That's harmful for all children to be opting them out of. I do not support this policy, how it's been implemented, and especially without revisions to disallow bias and bigotry in our schools. I want to mention that it is not acceptable to center religion in discussions of public policy for public schools. And so you all have been aware of where I've come from. I've actively helped work on, the policy to refine it, and that's just what I do with policy, but I still stand here.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments, and I think that it is very tough. The protected classes language, it was suggested to us that it would be very hard to weigh various protected class requests. But I do think we also heard from the community. The one that stood out to me this week was the student who commented, or family who commented, I can't remember, in a video that was sent about using the policy to avoid calorie counting because it was a student who was struggling with an eating disorder. We heard, I thought, actually quite a few examples of the kinds of individual circumstances that I referenced in terms of families requesting for reasons that were not, they may be not the loudest voices, but that were not purely around excusing for SEL and I really, really hope that the way the policy is implemented in the guidelines would not allow for missing of Hornet time or anti-bullying or, I really hope that they will be narrowly construed and used, because if we start hearing from the community otherwise, then I think we would have to definitely readdress. But I do think that the idea that the community was, the people in the community asking for a policy were only asking for opting out of LGBTQ issues was not that's not what I was
feeling like I was hearing from the entirety of the community, though I grant that there was a lot of that framing. And I'm not sure what to make of Ms. Starling's language, which I agree was offensive, but it's like, so are we supposed to listen to her and not have a policy because, or listen to the lawyers and not have a policy? Because that would be, because that was, like, if her language was bad there, then that language was used in the individual circumstances memo, right? So that was the only part that I was talking about, is whether or not we leave the individual circumstances language in the policy we've created. And I definitely have heard from teachers that they would like to see and, you know, from our teaching and learning team, and that a framework would be helpful. But I'm not unaware of the nationwide horrors being perpetuated on the LGBTQ community and the laws, but I don't think that this policy is doing that. And if it is implemented in those ways, I'd be gravely upset and the first one standing on a table to yell about it.
Thank you, Nick. Someone else, Brett?
Yeah, I wanted to listen for a few minutes, and I'll weigh in a little bit now. First of all, you know, I see this policy, and I've said this before, really as like a parent-school partnership policy, okay? And I'm glad to see the old 2240 will be retired, right? Because I'm glad to see that controversial, I've already expressed how I feel about that. The one thing that I will tell you that it shouldn't surprise anybody when I talk about how much expertise has mattered to me. And so, for example, when we were talking about medical decisions and we were valuing the expertise of those individuals of the health department. And so I will flat out tell you that my initial preference does lie with the idea of, if our legal partners are saying that we shouldn't have that language, then my initial instinct is to say, I would take that out. That said, overall, I would like to see 2240 be a positive experience. And I think there's so much good here that I guess how I'm coming to this is, I could take it, I guess, either way, because what I would say is this: I respect the work of the policy team who went through this and who looked at this and said, this is language that we've debated. We've engaged with our community at multiple times. We've had evening and multiple meetings. We've dealt with this for a long, long time, and you have, right? And so I guess I would say that I respect the work of the policy team, and I would not vote nay just based on that, is what I would say. You know, and then I guess the other thing I would say, and we just kind of touched on this, is that, you know, I do think we need 2240 as it's written here, because if I put my educator hat on, the new 2240, the instructional materials opt-out, then this policy, instructional materials opt-out, one of the things I really like about it is it trusts educators as professionals, and it empowers educators as professionals to be leaders in their classrooms about the materials that they select. And so, like, there's language in here about Saline area schools embraces diversity and inclusion, and about students being able to see themselves in the curriculum that the district offers, and being able to, you know, reflect and consider alternative viewpoints. I want that for my kid. Right? I want that for both my children. So I guess what I would say is I greatly respect the fact that this instructional materials and opt-out policy, whatever number it might be called, right, like, does that for educators, because it allows them to now have some framework and some ways in which they can now implement this, and now we're gonna have administrative guidelines that stand behind them and say, like, so now if I'm an educator in a classroom and I wanna try and I wanna do this, I feel empowered to say, I can. And for me, that's where this kind of lies in my support. So that's what I'll say for now.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, so a lot to read here. I guess my thought on this is, it is important that we have an opt-out policy for our community. I mean, parents, I think, whether we want to agree on how we raise our kids or not, that's their right. So I think that's important. And I also think this policy may not be perfect, and I don't think it'll ever be perfect for any single one person. We're going to have to find a way to make it work for everybody. And I think that's important. I think this does it. I mean, I question some things in there, like only accepting a district opt-out policy. Is that going to legally be okay? I don't know. But this is a start. And in the guidelines, when we go to the guidelines, at the end of the day, we don't want any child that a parent is opting out of any kind of program to feel weird when they leave or whatnot. So if done right, it shouldn't affect anybody else. So it shouldn't matter what one person thinks they should be hearing or they shouldn't be hearing, because it should be done seamlessly. And so therefore, I don't think it matters, and I think it's important. I think it is about an individual right.
I want to clarify a couple of things that we've heard from legal, just some things that you said, just because we have it from legal, so I can offer it to you. It's not my own opinion. So the first is the legality of only accepting the Saline area schools opt-out form. That is legal. We do have backing to do that, and it actually helps us, because when there are multiple different forms coming from different people, it's more difficult for us to operationalize and uniformly implement a policy. So legal did actually, they liked that idea a lot, that was, it again, narrowly focused the opt-out option. The other thing is, and I know this is controversial, I'm just relaying the information that was given to us from Troon, in terms of what is a right afforded by law. Opting out is only a right under those multiple items that we mentioned back in May, and we listed those things, and I can list them again for you. But in terms of opting out of other material, it actually is not a right that's legally afforded unless it falls into one of those categories. So that is why the legal is saying you don't need to have this policy, but we are considering it an act of partnership with I am considering it, and people that I've talked to are considering it an act of partnership with parents. And I think that what it affords is some consistency. And the other thing that I appreciate about it is that it opens up a conversation for us to understand the perspectives that might be different than our own. And so when parents can have an opportunity to talk with educators, educators can see parents in a different light, and parents can see those educators in a different light. And maybe they still don't agree at the end of the day, but they've had that conversation and they can appreciate the humanity of the other person on the other end of the table. That's my hope in this policy. Okay. Trustee Eastep?
Yeah, that was one concern that I did have, and I think brought up, even though I have a couple, every time I see, I'm just kind of like Michael, I see something and misspelled or whatever, and I'm like, so I do have some of those, but to the point of what, like, rights federally and state that that are already there. I know that some of that language was is in our current policy, but didn't move over to this policy. And so that was kind of a concern that I had with, and actually probably plays into clarifying what Starlin was saying here, that you can't, opt out of, like, exam or something, so I didn't know if that's some language that to consider putting in to make that clearer, or we just trying to keep it broad anyways.
I thought that was why we had decided to go with calling the policy instructional materials, to make it clear that you cannot opt out of a teacher a specific teacher based on their identity. Like, this was pretty narrowly, you couldn't opt out of an entire, exam. Like, instructional materials is defined in the policy. That was my understanding, is that was how we were narrowing it, was by focusing on the instructional materials.
I can just add, as fresh eyes, not having seen this until recently, I did not read it as opting out a teacher either, and I would not agree with that.
I don't think I said that, but like, that's an example. I wasn't talking about that.
I thought when you were making your statement, you had said something about opting out of a teacher due to identity. Maybe you were talking about it in another state, not in our policy.
No, just, the specific ones that were kind of listed was, because instructional materials would also fit under, which that's something I think we need to put, reference, the sex ed, right? That's a whole, like, families can opt out, in a different process than this would be, that's already set. And then, yeah, there's the, like, surveys and things like that. But also, let me see, instruction on symptoms of disease, instruction on child sexual abuse, and then, yeah, so I mean, there are some kind of instructional material type things that are more like, well, I guess that's the right too, but then there's also, like I said, the testing and things like that, that's more clear that wouldn't be possible. Or like required curriculum through the state. And that's in here somewhere, I think, like those numbers.
So what Susan is referencing is in the first document that we received from Troon back in May. It lists very specifically 5 legally required, the legal requirements to allow parents to opt out. So she mentioned the right to opt out of sex education, the right to opt a student out of surveys, the right to opt students out of instruction under the characteristics or symptoms of a disease, the right to opt a student out of instruction on child sexual abuse, the right to be free from compulsory physical exams or medical treatment, and then lastly, it goes on to further explain that there might also be some changes in curriculum or changes in materials due to accommodating a student's disability or religion. So those are federal laws. So they mention those. So if you wanted to go back and look at those, it is on page 2 of that document from Troon.
And can I read real quick what our current policy says that I guess kind of encompass that maybe?
Sure.
That the student, however, will not be excused from participating in the course or activities mandated by the state. So I guess it was broad, right? Broad enough that I don't think it's referenced within the policy, but I don't know if it's worth maybe adding something like that or keeping that piece. I don't know. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Oh, so I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So you're wondering if we should add that piece back in because the state mandated curriculum. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the state mandated curriculum that? Yeah. Okay. Well, I would imagine that would be part of the administrative guidelines, right? That when the teaching and learning team was deciding that would be part of that it.
There was a required teaching topic that was part of the curriculum. The teaching and learning department would have to find another way to teach that if they felt they could. Otherwise, they would need to say, "Oh, you can't opt out of that part because there's no method of us meeting the need another way." That scenario could happen.
And I guess with that and talking about protecting our staff legally, I feel like us putting like legal stuff in the administrative guidelines is like the exact opposite of like that's where the policy should state it. So then it's very clear, because the administrative guidelines are kind of, they could change at any moment and how they're interpreted and things like that. So I just want to make sure that it's like legally as sound as can be is kind of what I'm bringing up on that component.
I just wanted to say that we do have some policies that mention the requirements for graduation, which we definitely could state it again in this policy, but there are other places that give guidance around the Michigan merit or required curriculum. But definitely we have had redundancy in policies before, so if that's something.
We have,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure it's necessary here at this time. We may find that it is.
Okay.
When this first, pardon me, when this first came up about 16, 17 months ago, the second time it came up, I naively thought it would be fairly straightforward, and it appears not to have been. And so I have listened very closely to the arguments that Trustee Eastep has put forward, and I have done a lot of research and had a lot of conversations privately, and I appreciate you allowing me to sit in the last two meetings, just to sit at the back and listen, because I was starting to lose the thread of the discussions, especially when it came to legal. So I want to thank Trustee Gold for a couple of things, for clarifying, and this is all, you've all added these words a few times. I wanted to say, some of my concerns were addressed this evening. Is the policy too broad? Apparently, according to our lawyers, the policy is narrow enough. It limits impact to a wide range of students, so this is good. I also appreciate that the teachers are not being placed in the hot seat. From the beginning, I've hoped that this policy would not be a burden to our teachers, and I still am optimistic. And I think that one of the reasons it won't be a burden is because of the leadership team, who will be addressing each and every one of the occasional opt-outs that come up. And I want to talk about that in just a second. Finally, we do have a number of policies at the bottom, including policy 9130, which addresses materials and so forth in the schools, and how one may get out of those, opt out of those materials. And as Dr. Gold noted, this policy does help us to avoid a patchwork of policies, and it goes a long way toward creating a framework. I also, in everything that I've heard from you, Susan, and I appreciate the concerns, Trustee Eastep, I appreciate your concerns. I also started doing a lot of investigation into what are other reasons. The reasons I tried to opt out of things in high school, I myself, and it happened several times. I went through the first frog dissection and thought, well, that's not going to happen again. And then I found out that fetal pigs were around the corner. So thank you, science teachers everywhere. I'm looking at you, Gerby. And I thought, I don't want to do it. And so I sought recourse and opted out, and I think I just had a head cold that day. You know, stuff happens. And I'm not trying to be light about this at all. I found 38 separate reasons that parents can legitimately opt their kids out, and some of them made absolute sense. I'm not even counting the calorie counting, which was, 39. And I'm sure there are more. So some of them are heartfelt and extremely difficult. And what I like about this policy, and from the sense I got from the administrative guidelines that I've been able to see early drafts, is that we start a conversation with the parents. If you have a concern, let's talk with the teacher, let's talk with the administrators. We're not just hitting an eject button and leaving. The teacher is saying, well, here's why we're approaching this. Let's have a conversation. And it's these conversations, I've heard it a couple of places here, an active partnership with parents, an essential conversation. All of this is really why we're here. It's about education and not making an ideological stance. It shouldn't be about making an ideological stance. And as you alluded earlier, Dr. Gold, let's see how this goes. If we find that things are not, if too many parents are opting out for those particular reasons, some of which you mentioned, it's time to reconsider the whole thing. This is a long conversation that we've had, and the last and final thing I wanted to say about this, to the end of this discussion, I think it's near the end, right, is thank you to Secretary Miller, thank you to Lauren Gold, thank you to Susan Eastup for everything you brought to the table. This was not, it's not over yet. And I'm sure we're going to hear, but what 2 superintendents from now are going to be talking about this, Dr. Lodge. And they'll look back on these notes and saying, wow, they made a stab, good try. But I appreciate the efforts, I really do. And I'll just draw my conclusions now.
Just to build on what you were saying, I just want to say that for my own personal part, that if this policy is accepted and we move forward with this policy, it doesn't mean that it's put to bed for me. We do have quarterly meetings with the superintendent, and I will plan on asking, like, how's it going? Are we noticing any trends? What's some of the feedback that's being received? And I hope that the community will continue to give us feedback as we work through this, and that our policies are dynamic and such that we have a working policy committee that can return to these and make revisions as needed. And so I don't think that this is, locked in cement when we're finished, that this is something that is ongoing and needs to have conversation continue around it as we notice and recognize the ways that it's being implemented. Okay, any final questions or thoughts? Okay, Trustee Eastup, and then if anyone else, and then we'll wrap it up until then Trustee Stebbin, and then we will look forward to a second reading, I think, if that's what President McVeigh decides. Okay.
So there is a trend. So I want to mention that there has been a trend, and that's why it's kind of been, this policy since 2019 has been kind of pending and not taken up, because the original suggestion, as we all know, was for the removal of it, and finding out, like, and we came back and obviously got, that it is, we can have it, but it's not legally required, that kind of thing. So there has been a trend of, opting out of the topics I have mentioned. So that's actually its main existence of why it's been a topic of conversation from the get-go. There are, within the policy, again, it says parents, guardians, and students have a right to inspect instructional materials, which is in policy that students have a right as well. And this is to the 18 and older. So we had said, if after careful review of these instructional materials, a parent, guardian, student identifies that it's yes. Yes. That the parent, guardian, student, and then it says 18 or older. So I know there is, like, that first sentence is accurate, right? That any student, regardless, under 18 can. And I know via legal, they added the 18 or older. So I just, do we need to take something out there or
So we did have 18 and older after the first piece, and then when we re-looked at policy, it doesn't say that you have to be 18 or older to inspect material. So they have the right to inspect material, but they don't have the right to opt out unless they're 18 or older.
But in that one sentence, so not the first sentence, that makes sense, right? That's, but the second one has, if after careful review, it still says student and doesn't have the 18 or older. So should we put it in that
Yeah, we probably should put the
first?
parentheses in there. Yeah, I can't remember. We did have it in one point, and then it was removed.
We have
so,
it
yeah, so
on
we can
down
put that
in
there.
the
That's fine.
sentence, but maybe we should put it at the
Betty's putting it
beginning.
in right now. Thanks, Betty.
Okay.
Thanks. I count that as like a Scrivener's, right? Like that's a, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No.
All right. Thank you for catching that.
So,
Using your language.
I think that was like
It is
the,
one of the best
main
words
thing.
I have learned when it comes to editing these things. Scrivener's errors, yeah.
and just one more thing. At the last paragraph, instructional materials, there's parentheses, so it says, that last sentence there of that paragraph, it says to and from question mark in the parentheses.
Yeah, I
so-
think when we were transporting it over, there had been a comment from Lauren that got it was a comment for edit.
Yeah.
So the suggestion is to change the to from. So if Betty can,
Okay, yeah.
thank you. That would make it more grammatical. Thank you. I keep saying doctor because of Dr. Gold, sorry. Trustee Stebbin, Vice President Stebbin.
It's okay, I'll take it. Thank you. Jennifer is just absolutely fine. So thank you for all of the pre-reads and the hard work from the policy team. I enjoyed hearing what everyone else thought. I'm comfortable having this move forward. A lot of the things that I wanted to hear about were already addressed. So I wanted to thank Susan for the really, the real statements about opting out identities and the discussion of DEI, so thank you. I also wanted to thank Lauren because I also have heard about eating disorders and other comments with regards to this opt-out. So recognize that there are medical situations, there are trauma from assault, there are all sorts of things that are also playing into here that families need to have conversations about that might be affecting a possible opt-out. It's not one category or another. It's probably several. So I appreciate that. I've always wanted to change the name of this policy. People and situations aren't controversial. Topics can be critically debated. There's a big difference. And I also appreciate in the pre-work Steve's comment about confidence in having strong administrative guidelines and trust in the teaching and learning and team to take this forward and to support staff appropriately. So look forward to whenever it shows up next.
All right, well, thank you for a healthy conversation tonight and for your comments. I know that I am listening intently and will continue to listen and listen to public comment. And if people want to reach out, I have had private conversations, I've had email conversations and phone calls and in-person conversations, and I know a lot of other people here have too. So we're always open to continuing that, and we'll look forward to when if President McVeigh decides to move this to a second reading.
You're giving it to me to decide? I'm giving it to you. Administration board updates now, thank you.
Yes, I have a few. I want to personally thank the Human Resources Department for onboarding over 50 staff members this summer. That is a tremendous amount of work, and the whole department has done a great job in sort of rapidly moving people into the organization, and then that onboarding process involves quite a few steps leading to professional development and then having them ready to start. It's an ongoing process for Kurt and the HR team. So thank you very much. And we also want to welcome all the new staff members. Saline Area Schools is a great place to work, and we're really excited to get the school year started. Tomorrow's our opening day, for those who don't realize, for our staff. And they come back tomorrow. Along with, we have some elementary open houses tomorrow evening, so we're excited to get the year started, and then we'll be eager to see all the students back on Monday, August 28th. I do want to point out some important changes and updates for the 23-24 school year, and Jackie Martin, our communications and community relations director, she'll be sending these out to the community either later this evening or tomorrow morning, and I wanted to more or less make sure everybody knows what they are. Most of them are positive, but we already heard from Rex this evening about the need to restructure some of our bus routes, leading to the cancellation for the first week of school of a couple of routes. And his team's working hard to try to figure out that stopgap solution with Divergent and just better strategies to get more drivers who are, permanently going to work for the Saline School. So they're working on it intently. So that message will go out. But another 3 other important messages that are very positive. There will be free breakfast and lunch for all students this year. That has been ongoing, but that continues, and that's great for our students and for students in all the other school districts as well. In addition, we have cashless athletics and concessions. We've always had, for the last few years, we've had cashless athletic ticket purchase, but now we are going that route with concessions, and Miranda and team have worked to get that in place. We continue to try to just make sure to maximize our usage of technology, and so that will be more or less where people order something and they go to the concession stand and they pick it up with their name or ID number, kind of like if you've ever been to Panera. That's how it works. You just pick stuff up on a counter. And then also we have some changes to our visitor check-in at school buildings. Hopefully people are starting to notice, but there are kiosks at the front of the school buildings now. And more or less what that does is allows the check-in process to begin before actually letting people into the vestibule, into the school areas. And we feel like this is going to be more efficient and safer, bottom line. So we're going to start rolling that out. I'm sure there'll be a few hiccups, but we'll work through that as we want to continue to work on the safety and security of our school buildings. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start down the table from Dr. Gold to Mr. Austin, if that's all right. If you have anything to add. If you don't, that's quite acceptable. Oh, that's a shaking of the head. Okay.
Actually, you do, the Sex Ed Advisory Board. Trustee Gold and I attended the Sex Ed Advisory Board, and it's the brand new one. And all 3 of our students who were on who chosen to be on the board were there and already contributing to the conversation, which was really cool. We had a presentation from the Washtenaw Area Council for Children, and they do some body safety training programs, and all sorts of different programs in different age groups. But something that actually the last meeting of the Sex Ed Advisory Board, when their term, right before their term was over, actually unanimously, oh my gosh, wanted to move forward with this program and bringing it to the board, having the hearings. And so also this new group, they did a presentation, and will be bringing it as well with the public hearings. So look for information on that. So getting started right away with the new board. And then there are, I think, through the end of September, I don't have the date, but there are applications being accepted and will be reviewed at the end of September for our wellness committee, and then also our diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory committee. So there's some spots open on that as well. So let people know to apply, and I'm excited and looking forward to helping with that process and seeing who applies. And so, okay.
Trustee Eastep, I understood there's supposed to be a meet and greet with the SEAB. Is that coming up, or was that what the meeting you were talking about?
No, there won't be a meet and greet, just the public hearings specifically.
Are you referring to the names of the committee being announced? Yes, but I'm not sure when.
Yeah, I think that'll be part of Well, yeah, Steve made that decision, so.
Apparently there will be one, it's just not been set up yet. Thank you, that's good.
Yeah,
Thank you. I worried that I missed it.
Short and sweet. We thanked a lot of people, and Rex, thank you again for that first slide with all of the hard work that's been going on, and the shout out to HR and the 50 plus new hires. But I specifically didn't hear our athletic department called out, and they are in the thick of things already. As of last week with MHSAA bringing us back last Monday, that team deserves a big shout out as well for all that they do for our kids and supporting them outside of the classroom. And I know that will be only amplified as we return to school with all of our clubs coming back into play. So go Hornets.
Ongoing professional development, I attended the MASB Summer Institute, and if you know anyone from Ferndale School, they just rocked a presentation on data, and the Dearborn School District had a phenomenal group of students presenting as well. On Thursday, the 17th, I attended an MASB legal workshop online, thank goodness. Interestingly, regarding Title IX issues, the ink is still wet on some of the Supreme Court cases. Literally, we're talking August 3rd was the most recent one. So they're still blending in and looking at issues related to that. Also parent rights and OMA updates and things like that. So it was an interesting time. So keep them fresh.
I just wanted to quickly say that I cannot be in attendance tomorrow for the opening day celebration, which kind of breaks my heart because when I was here, it was one of my favorite times to meet with the entire school district, the staff, and to reconnect with friends and colleagues, and just to have that overall feeling of the excitement around the first day of school. So I'm sad that I will not be here. I'm wishing all of our staff and our colleagues the best as they launch a new school year. There is just something exciting about the beginning of the school year. And I was just talking with a friend today who retired, and I was saying that I think the first week or two of school, like this PD week, and then the week that students come back, the first year that I retire, I will have to be someplace else so that I'm not confronted with that, because it is one of my favorite times of the year. So thank you to all of the teachers who are working outside of their contract. They are not paid during these days they are paid for a short, a few hours to set up their classrooms, but many are spending days and enlisting the help of their friends and family to set up their classrooms. Thank you to Buildings and Grounds and for all of the work that they're doing. Thank you to HR. I know that even last minute changes are coming and continue to roll in. So thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you to Steve for your leadership and your oversight in all of these areas that continue to support the learning experience for each of our students. And I will close on that.
All righty. I will echo that, that excitement is real, right? I was working cashless concessions, and, it was right after all the, the kids had gotten their teachers, right? And so everybody was really excited to share. I got Mr. Perry, I got Miss such and such, so it is an exciting time of year. And so I want to echo the thanks that I've heard here. I want to thank our coaches in athletics and a bus driver who took our soccer team 2 hours and 15 minutes to Midland and back, and just all of those things. And I really do want to make sure that I give a heartfelt thank you to every person who will impact the education of my children and other people's children this year in the classroom and in buildings, and getting them there safe and taking care of our grounds. And thank you very much. Appreciate you.
So I just want to echo all that as well. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, there's been a lot going on, not only at grounds and through the buildings and building maintenance and stuff, but through teachers, human resource, all that, and busy summer. And thank you.
Now, I know I said you wouldn't be required to report, but perhaps, do you have how's the feeling out there? Is there any excitement at all in the halls of our schools?
Yes, it's exciting to come and sit through all this and learn about high school and the board and all that. And one thing that President McVeigh said in the beginning, me and Caroline attended the National Student Board member Association conference this weekend, and we learned about all the agendas and how to write proposals and everything. So looking forward to read through all those and comment on them in future meetings.
I'll say something too. I am super excited, and I think that was helpful this weekend because now I know how to read all of this, and that was really great. So I'm excited to actually voice my opinion and throughout the school year, giving you guys updates on what's going on throughout the school with student showcases. So thank you.
And we really are looking forward to it. Thank you. All right. The consent agenda. The consent agenda is listed in this agenda and will not be read aloud. The motion noted will allow for the authorization of all listed items without discussion unless a member of the board requests that any one of them be considered individually. So I'd like to entertain a motion to authorize the consent agenda as printed.
So move, Stebbin.
Stebbin,
Support E-Step.
thank you very much. Support E-Step. All in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, okay. Thank you very much. The consent agenda has passed. Item scheduled on the next agenda, Dr. Lodge.
Yeah, the main schedule report will be a teaching and learning update about the continuous improvement cycle, and that'll come from the teaching and learning team.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The public comment section, a member of the public may briefly address the board for up to 3 minutes or request to be scheduled on the agenda of a future meeting. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and Changming Fan is first up. On deck is Ann Jeffers. Green is on.
Is it green? The light, is it the light? Try it one more, yes, you should.
Good evening, Changming Fan, local social entrepreneur. I really want to have to rush several things to want to share with you first. Thank you so much. The one who work of the policy, Jenny, you did great job. So all of you. And let me just steal Winston Churchill's famous quote: "American always do the things right after try all of other things." It's ongoing things. So, although some of part is not as some of you agree, but let's continue moving on. And this is just like American history. In the very beginning, the slave owners said all men are created equal. But until now, still things are not 100% equal, but this country keep going. And several things before I forgot. Michael, I finally can deliver to you as you request, also not just for you, for everybody, for the joint meeting record 44 pictures. So, but unfortunately, download it take forever, so I cannot give you today. And how can I give to you? Is it zip file you prefer? Can you give me a drum some way? And it's going to be quite a lot of pictures. A wonderful meeting between the city and the school board. And this should be always have the record, and the public should know, and you all should know about these wonderful things, how public can work with you guys. Dr. Large, you did great show on the report, and really one page is yellow and blue, and talk about persistent challenge and why we continue to have, because I totally agree with you. I like that. Life, it's just like that. We have to face these challenges and learn, commit, and do. That's why it's what we are here about. And that is one part of that, which is, I think, that continue to fight against discrimination, including a lot, and one part of the sub-teacher issue, not just here. I think whole nation is, but sub-teacher is like submarine or what is that? What kind of food? Consider, I think, is junk food. And that is something we have to continue. And finally, most important things, and thank you for you two being here. Congratulations. You represent future when they represent tomorrow. But it's so important. I like to work with you more. One last question. the third draft of SALT initiative. After Mayor keep pushing me, can I give both of them? And that is the question. Maybe I should let you all know. I'm not going to give to them first review until it is okay. Thank you.
Mr. Fan, I will get you a thumb drive. Thank you.
Right now,
Not right now, soon.
99 megabytes. That's quite a lot.
No problem, Dr. Jeffers. And on deck is Megan Gunnarsson.
I'll keep this short. Just a few comments about some of the stuff that I saw tonight. So you all know where I stand on the policy, so I don't want to spend any time talking about that. Susan took one of my comments, which was gathering feedback from the teachers and making sure that you're getting important feedback from them, because I think they're the ones who are on the ground and who are the ones who are going to have to deal with the policy along with the teaching and learning teams. And so maybe inviting the union to come speak at the next board meeting, for example, might be a good idea. Another thing related to the policy was that I was surprised to hear that there were a couple of board members who were concerned about some of the wording in the lawyer's language, and I just wanted to remind you all that you have the ability to appoint the lawyers, and you can always seek second feedback. I had some feedback also on the listening sessions that sorry, I'm still getting ready for school mode. Dr. Lodge presented on. So I have 3 kids. 2 of them are Black, 1 of them is LGBTQ. All 3 of them have disabilities, right? So as a working parent, I'm not going to show up to 3 different listening sessions, and so I picked the disability one. But there was some discussion that took place where Shannon had spent a lot of time talking about getting rid of the N-word, right? And she was doing a lot of important work on that particular slur. But as a result of that, there was an increase in the F slur, the R slur, anti-Asian slurs, and all of that. And so there was some discussion that basically said more work needs to be done. And I think we all acknowledge that. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think the listening sessions need to be gathered in a way that accounts for intersecting identities, basically. And then the last piece of question that I have for you is about the middle school construction. So I can't pronounce it, but it's the Tebow Road, where it exits onto Ann Arbor Saline Road. That intersection is pretty hairy in the mornings at drop-off. And so I was just wondering, with the increased traffic on Ann Arbor Saline Road due to Maple being closed, is there something that's going to be done about that intersection? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan Gunnarsson. And on deck is Libby Williams.
Sorry. So I just have some feedback about the wording of the policy, just to kind of highlight some community concerns, where it says parents and students will have the right to inspect instructional material. I'm hoping that with your all-district meeting tomorrow, you can remind the teachers or work with them to provide in-depth syllabi so that parents have the opportunity to review and then make educated decisions. And then my other concern as a parent who has utilized the opt-out program before, it says that such requests will be considered by the team, and should they be considered with respect to the individual. As a mom, I'm not seeking your permission for my child to opt out. I'm informing you that they're not going to miss an entire academic day and they're going to miss a lesson. And I come to you after having gone to Dr. Washington's presentation before I allowed my son to go, and we don't ever use that word, and I don't want it to ever be normalized for him to say some can use it and some can't, so I chose that he not go, and I will continue to do that. Had I gotten a in-depth syllabi, my child would not have seen a film in AP Psych that had a guess the gay in it. To say that that was damaging is an understatement. And I can't believe that had I gotten an in-depth syllabi, she would have been in that classroom, because she would not have been in that classroom. I'm sorry, I love my kids, and we all love our own kids, but that was disgusting. And she confronted her teacher and got pushback for that happening. Not acceptable. And I expect in-depth syllabi, if your teachers are gonna put their neck on the line to show something like that, I'm gonna opt my child out. I have a license. Some of you have a license. You have standards of practice you have to abide by, and you have a code of conduct. As far as I'm concerned, showing that film of Guess the Gay was a violation of both. And you shouldn't be a teacher if you're going to single children out like that.
Thank you, Libby Williams. And Libby Williams.
Now it is. Okay, good. Good evening. I wanted to thank the board and policy team for making it clear that you have provided that the opt-out policy is against legal advice. That there are actual rights that are afforded, and there are some that are simply perceived regarding this issue, and I want to thank you for stating that very clearly tonight, actually. I'm also happy to hear that the form that will be standardized through the school board, so there will not be any secondary forms. I'm glad to hear that. I also echo Dr. Gold's hope that this policy will not be used to opt out of DEI, SEL, or Hornet time activities, but my hopes are not that high. I hope they're not. But I do hope that the board take that into consideration on how to handle that situation when it undoubtedly does arise, when they fine-tune the administrative guidelines regarding it. As you say, the policy and the guidelines are malleable, and you can change them as needed, and I hope you take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to the agenda. The next meeting of the Board of Education will be held on, not August 22nd. Oh, I know. You're usually flawless. What is the date? September 12th. Thank you very much. And I think that evening we're going to be meeting some of our new hires, I believe. I would like to entertain a motion to enter into closed session of the Board of Education at about 9:05 with the intent to reopen at, how long will we take? 5 minutes? At 9:10 for the purpose of collective bargaining. 8C of the Open Meetings Act. Under Section 8C, just a simple majority vote is sufficient to enter into closed session. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved. Oh, go ahead, Tim. Tim's got it. I'll support.
Who moved? Tim Austin? Thank you. And second? Oh, Steven J.S. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for leaving the room fairly promptly, and there will be no votes or action taken on our return, so you won't be missing anything. That's also my name. So I was a bit confused, and please don't. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn the regular Board of Education meeting of August 22nd, 2023 at 9:16.
So moved, Eastep?
E-Step moves. Who's that, Tim? Austin seconds. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Looking at you, Gerby? No, thank you. See you on September 12th.